אני לא שומעת אותך.
היי דלית, לא שומעים אותך? הנה גשם איתנו. We can't hear you, דלית. תפתחי את הרמקול? לא.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Okay. All right. Shall we start?
Okay. Now you can hear me? Okay. Sorry, I was on mute and I couldn't see that I'm on mute. So it's so nice to see you again, Geshe.
Hi, nice to see you
miss
too.
We are okay here. We are very power people, so we are okay.
Good, good.
But a little bit nuts, but it's okay too. So it's precious time with you. So we are very glad to see you here.
All right. Yeah. Great to see you too. Many of you I haven't seen last time, so it's nice after
I
that
got
break.
the flu, you say? שפעת? שפעת אומרים flu? Yeah.
You had a flu?
Yeah, with antibiotic and everything, so... But I'm okay now.
Good. Good to hear. Okay, great. Let's start then, right? We start again with setting the right motivation, generating the right motivation. But of course, first we do some breathing meditation. Now to feel inspired, visualize that the Buddha is in the space in front of you, which is actually no make-believe because the Buddha's mind is everywhere, except we're not aware of it. And then also think that you're surrounded by each and every sentient being. Remembering that it's only in dependence on every sentient being that we can become enlightened. Because it's focusing on them that we aspire to the awakening state of a Buddha. But sentient beings are important in so many ways. Just for our mere survival, getting the food and drink we need, clothing, and also when it comes to our education, our knowledge. It all depends on others. Likewise, love and compassion are practiced in dependence on others. So therefore, try to generate affectionate love, which consider sentient beings to be endearing, is fond of sentient beings and has a caring attitude towards them. And then focusing in particular on all the limitations, the temporary limitations, the different sufferings, the dissatisfactory existence of sentient beings generate great compassion that sincerely wishes for each and every sentient beings to be free from these, as well as wishes to help sentient beings overcome their dissatisfactions and all their limitations. Especially in the form of their mental afflictions. Which then turns into the altruistic attitude that is determined to take personal responsibility for the welfare of all sentient beings, for helping them to overcome their suffering and its causes. Which of course is only realistically possible if we first attain the awakened state of a Buddha. So let's then generate bodhicitta, a mind that wants to become enlightened in order to then to be of greatest benefit for all sentient beings. So try to really generate that sincere aspiration by thinking, from now on, I'll do whatever I can to work towards the enlightened state of a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. And so with this in mind, let's recite the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha, to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha, to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha, to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, great. So one announcement. Unfortunately, we cannot have class next week because I'm traveling to Germany. Which means the first week I'm a little busy. My father has surgery and I need to help out. Eye surgery, so I need to be there. But we can continue the Monday after that. And we can also change the timing a little bit, which may be easier for you in Israel if you want to have it, what would it be, a little later? right? So Dalit, you can let me know what everyone decides.
I'll check.
Remember, yeah, please check. So last year and the years before in the winter, it would always be at a different time, and I leave it up to you guys. All right. Yeah, so but I can't reschedule next week because, like I'm saying, as I just said, I have a lot of commitments next week. Okay, but anyway, let's go back to the questions. Like we still had some questions left from Jimmy, who can't be with us for some time, at least not live. So he asked about a week ago, I think it was. So we've already agreed that there are no findable dividing lines between things. So returning to, of course, emptiness and saying that there's no ultimately findable line, like exactly dividing certain things. I mean, especially on an atomic level, for instance, like thinking of matter. But only conventionally drawn dividing lines. Okay, then how many living beings exist conventionally? There are two views on this. No one knows the exact answer. No one knows how many. Well, in terms of the two answers, one is they're limitless sentient beings, so of course you can't posit a number. And the other view is that there's a finite number of sentient beings, but who knows how many. So how many living beings? I can't answer that. But now the reason he's asking this, for example, if someone is not familiar with human physiology may think that Jimmy and his cat sitting in his lap are one thing, not two, but one, right? Okay, well, that's a wrong view. I mean, if they agree a sentient being, living being, is someone who we label on the basis of his or her mind and body, or at least one of the two, mind or body, then of course Jim and his cat, there are two bodies here, two different mental continua. So therefore that would be a wrong assertion that Jimmy and his cat are one person. And similarly, could an alien also believe that Jimmy's body, his left hand scratching his head and his right hand writing with a pen, are actually three separate things? Well, yeah, they could believe that, but depending on how they define a person, so seeing three persons here, I mean, I don't know how an alien would define a person, but possibly similarly, I mean, seeing an individual, seeing a living being there, and if see one individual as being three beings, well, I guess it would be a wrong consciousness. Unless again, maybe on a daily basis they see the person from moment to moment as different, and again that's not contradictory actually, because we also see a person, or we understand that a person is different in such a way, like moment by moment the person is different, and if based on that they give this particular person different names, that's also okay. But to see them at one point as three people, yeah, I don't know how that would work. I think it would just simply be a wrong consciousness. But the thing is, one person can be seen in many different ways. So there's no contradiction with that. I don't know, Jimmy the cook, Jimmy the student, etc. In that way, you could definitely say even one person has endless different characteristics in that sense. I mean, isolates or characteristic, like Jimmy the cook, Jimmy the man, Jimmy the Australian, and so forth. Anyway, so yeah, I hope I've answered that question. And what is the criteria of having realized Jimmy? All right, so can we realize anything ultimately? No. So, because as he says, since nothing exists ultimately, he says, I would say that we can only realize things conventionally. Yes, absolutely, that's correct. What is then the criteria for having realized a person conventionally? For example, to realize Jimmy the person. So to know to know that someone exists conventionally, because as we've heard in the past when we studied emptiness, well, nothing exists ultimately. Everything exists conventionally as being merely labeled. Now, there are three criteria. The three criteria for something to be conventionally existent are just known, it is taken to mind by consciousness, it is not refuted by other conventional minds, it is not refuted by the ultimate cognition of an Arya. So, okay, those are the three criteria. If you remember, if you don't, you can go back to the material, especially the introductory part to the fundamental wisdom that we at least started. There you have the three criteria. But anyway, his question is mainly concerns the second point. So it is not refuted conventionally by a conventional valid mind. So not by a mind. Here, a conventional valid mind or a valid cognizer refers to a mind that does not reflect on emptiness, on the ultimate truth, but just a kind of an ordinary conventional mind that knows a table is a table and not a chair and so forth. Of course, all operating on a conventional level, but based on the conventions we have, well, a snake is not a rope is not a snake. That differentiates between the two. So saying, therefore, if something exists conventionally, it does not contradict such a conventional mind. Does this have any significance as opposed to saying it's not refutable conventionally? Well, those mean the same thing. Then it's not refutable means the same as it is not refuted. So in Tibetan, you don't really differentiate between the two. I mean, you can use different words, and in some context it is used, you say either it's refuted or refutable. You do draw this distinction, but here in this context, saying it is not refuted conventionally is really saying there's no mind, no conventional mind that refutes this phenomenon if it does exist. It's impossible for a conventional valid cognizer to refute something when it exists. Okay. When it exists, or if it exists. So if it exists, so to exist and to exist conventionally mean the same thing. For example, could something be a valid conventional truth simply because nobody bothers to refute it? No, I mean, like, that's the thing, like nobody. I mean, how do you determine nobody? I mean, it means really it is not refutably, it's not refutable conventionally. So if there were no one to bother to refute it, then even flying cows would exist because no one would bother to refute them with a conventional mind. But of course, they can be refuted because flying cows, at least when we say what is a cow, so here of course we work on the level of conventions. A cow, I mean, we all know what are the main kind of characteristics. They certainly don't fly. I mean, if they do fly, we don't call them cows. Okay. So yeah, anyways, if there's no one bothered, that's not what we're talking about here. So yeah, if another mind is too lazy or whatever, no, it means that there's no way, if something exists, there's no way it can be contradicted. There's no way it is refutable conventionally. All right, I hope that's clear. So that was his question from last time. That was the last question he asked, or the last question from last time at least. And then Shmuel asked a question. Is he here? Yeah, there he is. Okay. So suppose one's next rebirth is a rebirth in the higher realms, but it's not a precious human rebirth, in the sense that it is not conducive to practicing the Dharma. All right. In such a case, it is almost certain that one rebirth after the next rebirth will be a rebirth in the lower realms. Now I'm wondering, how did you come to this conclusion? First of all, if someone doesn't have a precious human rebirth, they will certainly be reborn in the lower realms. And why do you say one rebirth after the next rebirth? So like in the immediately next rebirth, they won't be reborn in the lower realms, but in the one afterwards, they'll be reborn in the lower realms. How did you come to this conclusion? I'm wondering, Shmuel.
Because it is hard to be born in a high rebirth. So if they don't use, so if their next rebirth, if they don't use it to gather lots of causes and conditions to be born in high rebirths, then in the rebirth that will follow the high rebirth, that rebirth number 2 will be a lower one.
Oh, so you're
Or
saying
is very likely to.
the current rebirth is rebirth number 1, and then the second one would be the next one. Immediately, I mean, if I die, so let's say I don't have a precious human rebirth in this lifetime. If I didn't have one, then in my next lifetime, I would go into the lower realms. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
All right. So let me ask you, what are the causes for rebirth in the higher realms? What are the causes?
Think that ethical conduct.
Okay. Do I have to be a Buddhist to practice ethical conduct?
No.
No. So even if I don't have any interest in the Dharma and I don't fulfill all the endowments and all the leisures that are part of a precious human rebirth, could I still engage in virtuous actions? Be a very
No.
ethical. No, you don't think so? Let's say, for instance, one of the endowments is having faith in the Dharma, in Buddha Dharma, in Buddhism, right? So if I didn't have that, if I was missing that particular characteristic of being at least open to the Dharma, let's say I have the view Buddhism is is a system that holds a lot of wrong views, could I still, so I wouldn't have a precious human rebirth. By definition, if I hold strong wrong views about the Buddha Dharma, I don't have a precious human rebirth. So in that case, could I still live a very ethical, a very moral life, maybe based on Jewish principles or based on Christian principles?
Yes, that is possible, but you would still need to have a precious human rebirth in a wider sense that is conducive to some form of spiritual practice, which is only as a human.
Wait, in a wider sense, I mean, precious human rebirth in the sense that I have faith in Christianity, for instance?
In
Or are
some
you talking...
spiritual system, yes. In
Yeah,
basic human values.
But
at
I
least.
mean, it could be an atheist and just believe it's the right thing not to harm myself and others.
Yes, but it still has to be a... Yes, I agree.
And so you see that anyway, the precious human rebirth is not defined by the way you defined it just now, like just having an openness to spirituality. It is very specific that in order to have a precious human rebirth, you have no wrong views. I don't know exact the wording now, but there's no wrong views when it comes to the Buddha Dharma. So therefore, actually, that being the case, so a person who's an atheist, or a person who's like, or not, no, it's not the right word, an atheist, someone agnostic, like someone who's got no interest in any kind of spirituality, that kind of person, by definition, doesn't have a precious rebirth. I mean, in the Buddhist context, of course, a precious human rebirth, but they can still live a very moral, a very ethical life, benefit other sentient beings. They would be reborn in the higher realms.
So
Don't you think?
perhaps I should have just said a human rebirth.
Yeah, that would have been, yeah. So, okay, so someone wants next birth is a rebirth in the higher realms, but it's not a human rebirth. Well, they could be in the one's next birth suppose one's next rebirth is a rebirth in the higher realms. Oh, the next rebirth. Okay, so let's say it's in the celestial realm. So could they not be, because of their virtuous actions, again be reborn in the celestial realm? Do you have to be born human? And even an animal, like even an animal may, I don't know, I mean, there are dogs and I don't know, dolphins and so forth who don't harm that don't harm other living beings, that are in fact very kind to other living beings and so forth. So if they don't engage in any immoral actions, they could also be reborn in the human higher realm, couldn't they?
If that were so, then the human rebirth would not be so rare.
Well, it's kind of rare to have. I'm not saying that, there are a lot of animals like that, but they do exist. I mean, just rare means not impossible. Human rebirth is not that rare. Precious human rebirth is that rare. When they talk about the human rebirth being rare, that's always in the context of the precious human rebirth. And anyway, I mean, there are not that many animals that accumulate virtue, for instance. And they do say it is harder once you're reborn in the lower realms to be born in the higher realm again. But specifically here, it's talking about the precious human realm. I mean, it is difficult to be reborn in the higher realm, definitely more difficult, of course. But when they talk about how difficult it is, if like once in a while the turtle, the blind turtle, comes to the surface of the ocean, and the likelihood of hitting the yolk, that's talking about a precious human rebirth. And that is quite rare. I mean, look around in this world, how many people there are, right? Who have precious. I mean, how many people are really interested in the Dharma and practice it? It's quite rare. Anyway, so please think about it again. And I don't think I need to read the rest, right? Because with everything else, you're right. If that is so, then doesn't it mean that the minimal requirement needed to continue the path and avoid suffering is not merely a higher rebirth, but a rebirth that's conducive? Yeah, so to practice the Dharma and to avoid, to continue on the path. All right, so here you mean the Buddhist path. All right, that's different. This is so because any other rebirth. All right. Anyway, think about it once more, Shmuel, and then come back to me if you want. All right. Great. So let's continue with this. I'm wondering, I'm going through these realms, and I don't know how interesting or how, let's not say interesting, but how helpful it is for many of you. But if you really want to study philosophy, this is an important part. I mean, we study about this quite a lot, especially about form and formless realms and what you need to do to be reborn there, even though it's not considered to be a goal to be reborn there. With a few exceptions, but in general, like especially formless realm, no bodhisattva aims to be reborn in the formless realm. Why would you aim towards being reborn there if you can't communicate with other beings, if you can't benefit them? And still, we learn a lot about this. It's all part to understanding. It's all part to understanding what the mind can do, the possibilities, and of course also what samsara really means. It's not enough to just understand the human realm and the animal realm and get a good sense of what samsara is all about. It's so much vaster. And I don't want to leave it out because it would just be incomplete. Our understanding of philosophy, of the Buddha Dharma, would be incomplete. All right. Anyway, last time I talked a lot about the importance of generating a certain feeling. With this feeling, I mean, I think without it, if it's just cerebral, everything is just in the head, and it's just an intellectual understanding we have, first of all, it'll feel dry, and we probably lose interest at some point. So it's extremely important to bring whatever we learn about the Dharma onto an emotional level, because the emotions are what drive us. And I'm not talking about negative emotions, but positive ones. So, for instance, that's why relying on a Lama is considered to be so helpful, because they inspire us. A Lama inspires us. A Lama brings joy to our mind. A Lama causes devotion in our mind. So this devotion, for instance, is a joyful feeling which drives us to continue with our practice. We want to become like them. We want to put into practice. We want to please them. This is such a a beautiful practice, usually described as guru yoga, or the yoga of the relying on a spiritual master. Not because it's important for the master, of course not. It's so helpful for our own mind. It feels really good. It allows us to go beyond our ordinary kind of life that may feel good in certain ways. Of course, we have pleasant experiences, but they're nothing in comparison to the joy of being around someone as inspiring, such as His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I mean, it's just the fact that people, when His Holiness gives a teaching here in Dharamsala, or at least in the past gave teachings here in Dharamsala, people fighting for the seats to be near him, because just that joy of being in his presence. This is, of course, I'm not condoning that, fighting for seats. That's actually totally in contradiction to what His Holiness teaches, but just the fact that, yeah, people really wanted to be around him shows that happy, that feeling, that pleasant feeling that arises. But first of all, we can generate that kind of pleasant feelings by just thinking of the Lama, by just thinking of a person such as His Holiness who inspires us, or of course, there are many great other masters. But these are not the only feelings that I want to stress. Also, just being amazed. For instance, when talking about samsara, how vast it is. Last time I spoke a lot about the fact that, well, our experiences are totally subjective. I showed you the picture of the shoe, I showed you the picture of the dress, how even as human beings, we can have quite different perceptions when it comes to color. But of course, on a larger scale, everything that we perceive is because we have the karma to have a human experience. I mean, it's our karma to be reborn as a human being. Therefore, we have a human brain, we have human sense faculties. And there's no contradiction really based on that. If you really are convinced that our experiences are totally subjective, then the fact that there are other realms, that there's no contradictions. We just can't perceive them. Anyway, at this modern day and age, there's so much we now believe to be existent, although we can't see it. Of course, radio waves, ultrasound, what is it called? Ultrasound, so it's called. Anyway, never mind. These different types of microwaves, but also different forms of existences. Now, it's important to, I believe it's to get a sense, to really get a sense, oh my God, I live in this world, in this universe with so many forms of existence, and many of them really scary. Many of them extremely scary. So first of all, I need to be careful. I need to be careful unless I want to experience that kind of suffering and that kind of hopelessness. I need to, of course, accumulate the right kind of causes and make an effort joyfully, because, well, I'm working towards something that's really worthwhile. Here in this case, a higher rebirth, but also to allow me, or to enable me to generate compassion for this incredible suffering of sentient beings, not just in this human realm, not just in the animal realm, but in these lower states where a lot more living beings reside than in the human or animal realm. It seems hard to believe, but again, it's so much easier to be reborn in lower states. It's so much easier to be controlled by our afflictive emotions than it is to be controlled by our, by love, compassion, and other positive states. So based on that, also, when we generate bodhicitta, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for instance, has taught so much about it. In the recent years, has very much emphasized bodhicitta, emptiness. And of course, he's not the only one. Many great masters emphasize this. And as I said last time, yeah, it's for us right now at this point, it's pretty fake. But we fake it until we make it. I mean, this is what Buddhist practice is all about. I mean, I mentioned tantric practice last time, and a lot of other practices that initially they don't come spontaneously. We have to make an effort. So fake in that sense. But also in that initially we just go through the motions until we have familiarized with certain practices, and they become a part of us. So therefore with bodhicitta, although we may be far from even having compassion, great compassion and so forth, well, without giving up, continuously to work on it and to deepen our sense of care and our sense of affectionate love, the altruistic attitude and so forth, by focusing on all sentient beings, also on those who are right now, as we're here together studying the Precious Garland, suffering so greatly. Anyway, so to kind of get that sense that this is real. The Buddha had no reason to lie to us. The Buddha had no reason to make it up. I mean, why? It's so complicated, all these realms. Just forget about them. Let's get down to the human realm and the animal realm and leave the rest. If none of these realms existed, no one would have talked about it. But it's an important part. So just to stress it again. And in this context, well, I basically spoke about this, of course, only in the context of the feelings that are mentioned in the root text, in the Precious Garland, which says that higher rebirth are regarded as happiness. And Gyaltsabje specifies here, well, happiness here doesn't just include happy or pleasant feelings, but also neutral feelings. And why are neutral feelings mentioned? Because in certain realms, that is the fourth level of the form realm and the formless realm, there are only neutral feelings, which seems pretty boring, that beings live in these realms and they only have boring feelings, but they're supposed to be the higher realms. So now to understand that, and in this context also understand a little bit about the concentrations, I went into some detail. And as I mentioned before, we study in a lot of detail. We study about 2 months on just this. First, it's like, what do I care? But once you get into it, it really gives you a good sense of the incredible potential of our own mind. That's what's most fascinating, I guess, learning about the higher realms. Anyway, so in this context, I've also gone into some details on them. So last time I already spoke about the different sufferings, the lower realms, for instance, and then in contrast, the sentient beings of the higher realms typically experience predominantly pleasant or neutral feelings. Of course, this is not always true for humans in particular, but in general, this is true. Overall, we can say in the higher realms, there's more happiness, more, and also, of course, more neutral feelings. As I said, this is particularly prevalent in the fourth level of the form realm and in the formless realm. Anyway, so it's important to understand that according to Buddhist cosmology, cyclic existence consists of these three. Many of you know this: the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. And then each of these can be, of course, divided into further levels, just because it's so vast. These different existences are so extensive. So anyway, the desire realm has 6 levels, of which the highest, the celestial realm, has 6 sub-levels. And actually, the other ones also have sub-levels, but also oftentimes the celestial beings, their sub-levels are mentioned more frequently. So I've also mentioned them here by name. Also, the other ones don't necessarily have a name, but here they have specific names. So this is nothing I need to go into details about, just to give you a list of course, the 6 realms of the desire realm, and then the celestial beings have also these 6 subdivisions. All right, that's just for reference, just to know them by name, or if you're interested. And then you have the form realm: first dhyana, second dhyana, third dhyana, fourth dhyana. Okay, so I chose the word dhyana here instead of concentration, as it's often called, simply because I don't think concentration is a good translation. In Sanskrit it is dhyana here, and pratamada just means first. Here you've got the first dhyana, second dhyana, the proper Sanskrit term, and in Tibetan, samden, tangbo, so first. But samden doesn't mean just concentration. There is a word in Tibetan, dingensin, which means concentration, which is a mental factor or a mental function that accompanies a virtuous mind, for instance. So it's just a natural focus, a natural kind of focused mind that arises when you engage in virtue. So as we've spoken, I've spoken about it before, of course, virtuous minds, they calm the mind. And where does that calmness come from? Well, because the mind is concentrated in that moment. At least I believe it's one of the virtues. Unless I get it wrong, I have to look it up. But I believe it's one of the virtuous states of mind, concentration. Anyway, the point is that concentration is a mental factor we have naturally to a certain degree, whereas something we don't have naturally. It's something you have to generate through meditation. That's why I also added here an explanation. Oh, no, this is different. Anyway, so here I used the Sanskrit instead of saying meditative concentration. That gets too confusing. I just use the Sanskrit term. But anyway, the term dhyana actually is translated or can be translated as meditative concentration. Here in this context of the form realm, it typically refers to one of the 4 levels. So this is really a state of existence that is named, that is given the name dhyana or meditative concentration, basically because of the cause that you need to generate, that which you need to accumulate. You need to generate, a meditative concentration that then enables you, that then becomes the cause to reborn there. Therefore, the form and the formless realms, both of them actually, you need to first develop certain levels of concentration, which in a samsaric context, well, all they do is allow you to take rebirth in these states, which is not seen as conducive, if not in a dharmic context. In some dharmic context, it's conducive to be reborn in any of these states, at least the first dhyana. For hearers, for instance, they may choose to be reborn there. But other than that, it's just samsara, basically. From a Buddhist point of view, it's not seen as desirable. But the dhyanas, the concentrations themselves, they're very helpful for Buddhist practice. Anyway, I'll say a little bit more about this later on. But of course, for the desire realm, you don't need to generate any concentrations. It's just the afflictions that are mainly responsible for rebirth there. Karma and afflictions. Okay. So anyway, these are the form realms and the formless realms, given their names or citing their names. When discussing the various states within cyclic existence, Buddhist texts often further categorize the desire, form, and formless realms into the 9 levels of the 3 realms. I don't know whether you've come across this term. It's used a lot in our texts, the 9 levels of the 3 realms. Samdesagu, Kamsumsagu, sorry, not Samdesagu, Kamsumsagu is the Sanskrit term. So these include the desire realm, considered as 1 level. That's just considered as 1 level. And then along with the 4 levels of the form realm, that's number 2 until number 5, and the 4 levels of the formless realm. So just in case you come across this term, the 9 levels of the 3 realms, that's just an extensive version of the 3 realms. All right. So the desire realm derives its name, of course, from the predominance of intense desire. Yeah, well, we all know as human beings, especially the modern world, what drives our economy? Desire, especially desire for pleasant sensory experiences. So they're centered mainly around sensual and material cravings. For us beings of this realm, we have strong attachment to pleasant sensory experiences such as pleasant sights, sounds, and so forth. And of course, a strong dislike for unpleasant sense objects. All right. And the desire realm, of course, encompasses a broad spectrum of existences categorized into six states, ranging from the hot and cold hells to the 6 levels of the celestial realm. And like I said, last time at least, I spoke about this. It is helpful to meditate on this, to get a greater sense of what is going on in states of existence other than the human and the animal realm, on so many levels. Of course, to appreciate how lucky we are. I mean, when things go wrong in life and when we're depressed about, well, things turning out, or we having problems and difficulties, having experiences we dislike, and they depress us, well, to take a moment and think, what would it be like to be reborn, well, in a hell realm, in a hellish kind of existence, or as a hungry ghost? And it's Snee asked last time, well, are these states actual physical existences? Do they exist as physical realms? And in response, I asked, well, what about the human and the animal realms? Do they exist as physical realms? Well, yes, in the same way, actually, they exist equally as physical realms. But do they exist objectively as like places we could actually travel to as humans? No. I mean, as ordinary humans, of course, if you're born as a human, but you're actually a highly realized master with certain clairvoyances, then they can manifest with a body in these realms and communicate with these beings. They're aware of what is going on in these realms. That's why we're taught about them. We're taught about the hell realms, about the hungry ghost realms, of course, by the Buddha himself, but also by other great beings who experience these states. And they have no reason to lie to us. They went there. Or at least they had, through their clairvoyant powers, they could perceive these places and witness the incredible suffering, and then communicate it to us, for us to just have a better understanding of our existence, a fuller understanding of our existence, and in this way also have an opportunity to practice compassion, love and compassion, strengthen our love and compassion. Anyway, these are on one hand considered conventionally to be actual physical places, but subjective nevertheless. And unless we have as ordinary beings, unless we have the karma to be reborn there, we won't. Unless we have the karma to perceive them, we won't perceive them. They could be all around us and we don't perceive them, just as they don't perceive us. And what is totally real for us is totally real for them. Okay. I mean, our existence seems so solid and so real, but when we start questioning, of course, it all falls apart. Does it exist that way? The way I perceive it, is it totally subjective or not? And of course the answer is it's a completely subjective experience. What I experience on a daily basis, no one else in the human realm as an ordinary being without clairvoyance experiences or is aware of. And this is true for all of you. Anyway, so to take some time to think about the incredible physical agony. Is there something worse than feeling to be burned alive? I mean, of course, in the human realm, it also happens, and the unbearable pain, I mean, becomes clear by their screams and by their screams, like as an expression of their agony. And this happens to these beings all the time. And of course, at the same time, they're overwhelmed by hatred and despair. And then the hungry ghosts, of course, suffering extreme deprivation. So at the same time, they're driven by so much insatiable desires. I mean, we know how terrible it is to have desire for this and desire for that. We become so restless. If we have really strong desire and attachment, we can't sit still. But imagine it is so much stronger than what we experience now. Like you can never even lie down to rest because you're driven by this incredible desire. How terrible would that be? And of course, as a result of their past actions, they never get what they want. So the most basic desire we all have is food and drink. If we don't have food and drink, then we don't desire iPhones and iPads and beautiful houses. I mean, none of these. The first thing we need are foods and drinks, right? So when we lack these, there's no space for any other desire in our mind, basically. So we're mainly, well, in general, so we're mainly driven by the desire for food and drink, unless we're, of course, satisfied. But these beings having this most basic need to eat and drink, well, those needs are not met, in the sense that there are different types of hungry ghosts, but those who see food and drink from afar, but when they run towards it, it disappears. Or others have like physical conditions, internal obstructions. So these are external obstructions when the food and drink disappears. Then there are those who have knots in their necks, so they cannot swallow anything. Or those who, when they put the food and drink in their mouth, although there's no actual obstruction on the physical level, the food and the drink turns into something disgusting, unpalatable. So something that you know you can't eat or drink, really. I mean, think about that kind of existence. How horrible that would be. And then, of course, there are the harsh conditions for animals enduring the conditions of the natural world, such as heat, cold, hunger, and thirst. I was thinking before class, how could I make this most tangible? How can I talk about this without all of you getting bored stiff? I don't know whether you are bored about hearing about the realms. I don't even dare to usually, I mean, mostly when I teach a class, a short class, I don't talk about this because people are not interested. I thought if I had a movie to show you, like, go to the realms and take a movie, and oh my God, I think we wouldn't be able to watch it. It would be so horrific. Well, the animal realm, of course, there's plenty of documentaries about that. Anyway, so there's usually a differentiation between those living on land and those who inhabit water. Those animals that inhabit water and those that live on land. That's how it's usually divided. And then, of course, there's the human existence. We know about that mixture of pleasure and suffering. The semi-celestial beings who, although they enjoy significant sensual pleasures and have the appearance and often the behavior that is similar to those of the celestial realms, they have one problem. They're locked in conflicts and power struggles with the celestial beings of the desire realm, motivated by pride and envy. So it's not all good in the semi-celestial realm because of their pride and their envy, and they struggle with the celestial beings, at least some of them. And the celestial beings of the desire realm, they enjoy diverse forms of great pleasure. They're bound by attachment to sensory indulgence. So on one hand, they have incredible pleasure, but they also have great attachment, great desire for sensory experiences. But among the 6 celestial realms, those in the first 2 levels, they persistently have to fend off the attacks by the semi-celestial beings that are envious of their prosperity and other advantages. But beyond these, starting with the 3rd level that I mentioned before, called the land without combat, such struggles they cease. So that's why it's called land without combat. Anyway, so that's about the celestial realms. And we've heard about this before, and no need to go into more detail. But again, to at least internalize it through meditation, I think is definitely very helpful, because it just gives us a more realistic sense of what samsara is all about. But what I wanted to, in particular, introduce to you here is the form realm. Say a little bit about the form and formless realm. So these 2 realms of existence in Buddhist cosmology are considered higher than the desire realm. Yeah, because there's less suffering and less afflictions. These forms of existence are also celestial. They're described as celestial realms, but they're not celestial in terms of the celestial desire realm. But are free in particular of the coarse desire and craving found in the desire realm. Okay, so beings in those realms temporarily, very important, are free from the coarse desire and craving found in the lower realm, in the desire realm. They're distinguished by increasingly subtle states of consciousness and are typically accessible through advanced states of deep meditative concentration. So their consciousness is subtler because you are born in those realms only if before you are born in these realms, you practice advanced states of deep meditative concentrations. So the thought that may arise is, well, who knows about this? Like, for instance, if we think of the modern world in the West, who would even believe in the existence of form realms or be interested in practicing these advanced states of meditative concentration? Well, it's hard to believe that anyone in the West is really interested in that, living a typical Western life. But we mustn't forget that 2,500 years ago in India, there were a lot of practitioners of these deep meditative concentrations. In fact, they believed that rebirth in one of these higher realms was actually rebirth in was actually not rebirth in samsara, what was considered to be liberation. Many spiritual beings of ancient India thought rebirth in the form realm meant liberation. And so their practice, they aimed towards being reborn in these states. And the Buddha basically said, well, sorry, the Buddha specified, the Buddha or clarified to many of his disciples who followed these views. I mean, let's not forget the Buddha's students, Buddha's disciples were all, not all, many of his disciples had a background in the spiritual system that existed before Buddhism. So what we may nowadays call Hinduism, but of course there was not one specific religion as such. There were so many different spiritual systems, but many of these spiritual systems, like the Samghyas and so forth, they held the belief that these high states of concentrations, I'm not sure it's the Samghyas who held this belief, but there were many spiritual systems that held the belief that these meditative concentrations were the cause, they themselves were the cause of liberation, because you would reach the state of the form realms, and that would be liberation. But of course the Buddha said, no, this is still within samsara. Okay, so the form realm is defined by a subtle and refined mode of existence, transcending the coarse sensual experiences and intense cravings characteristics of the desire realm. So think it's this totally different state of existence that we can be reborn in, again, of course, subjective, as a result of our own mind, of the actions of our own mind, and therefore our mind, of our speech in our body. So, but they transcend the coarse sensual experiences of our realm, of the desire realm. And so although this realm includes a physical environment, there's a physical environment, and its inhabitants possess physical forms, hence the name. That's why it's called form realm, because there is a physical environment and beings have a form. Both the environment and the body of its beings are far more subtle than those of the celestial beings in the desire realm. Much more subtle. Well, we'll hear why more subtle. I mean, subtle, of course, because us ordinary beings of the desire realm wouldn't be able to perceive this kind of subtle state. But also the form realms corresponds to the serene states of the meditative absorptions of the 4 dhyanas that characterize it. So you have these 4 meditative absorptions of the 4 dhyanas, the 4 levels of the form realm that characterize it. Beings here are free from unpleasant physical and mental feelings. No unpleasant physical and mental feelings. I mean, that sounds, wow, how nice, right? No suffering whatsoever once you're reborn in these states. They do not experience sickness, pain, or discomfort, living instead in line with the stable and pleasant concentration they maintain. Okay. They're free from sexual desire and other coarse physical urges. Well, for being from the desire realm, you may think, oh, that sounds boring. Of course, in the modern age, all this is so important. But, well, let's see. There's so much, there's a joy that they experience that is so much greater than the joy you get from sexual activities and so forth. So anyway, it's free from sexual desire and other coarse physical urges. The form realm beings, or beings in the form realm, enjoy a peaceful existence with minimal mental distractions. And since taste and smell are linked to coarser physical forms, the living beings in this realm do not require food or drink. Again, it's like, oh my God, we enjoy to eat and drink so much, right? I mean, like in the desire realm, especially nowadays, I mean, the amounts of restaurants everywhere in the world, the food cultures, I mean, incredible. Like 1,000 years ago, there was nothing of that. So everything revolves, a lot of our lives revolve around delicious foods and drinks. But in these states, that is seen as coarse. It's seen as, for someone who has reached such a level, oh, there's so much greater bliss. There's so much more bliss. There's so much more satisfaction to be gained. Taste and the satisfaction that we gain through taste and smell from the perspective of a being in the form realm is totally inferior. Because the living beings in this realm do not require food or drink. And they subsist on the subtle nourishment provided by meditative stabilization. So if we think about the bliss of liberation and enlightenment, which is so much greater than this, it may actually give us a better sense that, well, the form and formless realm, they sound great, actually. If we hear about it, I mean, especially now we hear about the form realm, I mean, the joy of eating and drinking is considered to be totally inferior. There's a joy that is much greater, a joy that comes from the nourishment provided by meditative stabilization. So if we really think about it, that seems pretty tempting. But then, of course, we learn at the same time that liberation and enlightenment are so much greater. So it gives us a more realistic sense what we're actually aiming for, something that is so much greater than even the pleasures of the form realm. Life in the form realm revolves around the tranquility and pleasure derived from the four meditative absorptions, with only subtle visual, auditory, and tactile experiences. Interactions among beings are serene and harmonious, marked by the absence of negative emotions such as jealousy, anger, or greed. There are still negative emotions, but not these ones, because there's no anger. And greed is a very strong kind of desire. So jealousy is also a form of resentment, and resentment being, yeah, like not anger as such, but also a type of negative emotion that you don't find in the form realm, therefore they don't exist. No jealousy, no anger, no greed. Okay, Orit, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they are in meditative absorption, how can they have sensory input?
They're not always in meditative absorption. They're not always in those. They need to generate a meditative absorption to be reborn there, but they're not always in those states. No, they do arise from it. The formless realm is different. In the formless realm, you're always in a meditative absorption. So basically, our teacher used to say, like, you're born, there may be the thought, I'm born in the formless realm, and that's it. Then you're just focused, and then until the karma is exhausted, you remain in that realm. But in the form realm, it's different. Yeah, there are some pleasant experiences, of course, in the form of sounds, tactile sensations, and sights. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. All right, Sneh, go ahead.
Yeshima, I was just wondering, this word celestial, like in English, we think of it as like gods and goddesses. I was wondering in the Tibetan, like, what is that? Does it have a meaning that goes with that word? Like, who are these beings? Because they still have so much, like, the The semi-celestials fighting with the celestials.
Right. Okay, that's a good question. What makes it celestial? In Tibetan, actually, the word is even more difficult because it's ha. Ha can mean celestial in the sense of the devas and the what do you call the half devas. I can't think of the Sanskrit right now. Anyway,
Yes.
Yeah. So the
Asuras,
celestial. Asuras, that's right, the asuras. So the asuras, the devas. So that here you use the word ha. So Hamain, the asuras is actually saying the non-celestial beings, literally, in Tibetan, but it means kind of semi-celestial. And then you have the word used in the form, like when you refer to like a meditative deity, you also call the meditative deity La. So that becomes even more confusing. For instance, Avalokiteshvara is a La, but not a La in the samsaric sense. So when they say in the samsaric sense, I guess it's mainly because of their appearance and their behavior. I don't think semi-celestial beings are as hateful as humans can be, or they behave maybe. I don't think they have more intelligence. So there's a certain level of intelligence. There's a certain level of sophistication, maybe. Their appearance, their behavior. Then when we say about the semi-celestial beings that they are envious and so forth, that's not all they are, but that's what distinguishes them from the celestial beings of the desire realm. But it's pretty clear that in terms of their appearance and their behavior, there is similarity, and they do experience a lot of happiness. And then the celestial beings anyway, I mean, their bodies, if we think about our existence as humans, we think that's normal. But just the fact that our bodies start smelling after how many days, right? I mean, in the monsoon in India, like 2-3 days, it's just the nature of our body. We're born with a body that very quickly starts to become smelly and unhealthy. And we never question that. That's just for us normal. That's reality. But on these levels, it's very different. You don't have that kind of body. You have a body that doesn't smell, whether you clean it or not. You're not required to take bath from your mother's womb, which in itself is so painful and messy as well. I mean, it's still kind of a messy affair if you want. I'm not saying it in a negative way, but still, who wouldn't prefer spontaneous birth? So in those realms, it's spontaneous and, like aging, how difficult it is to grow old. For them, there is, of course, a kind of growing old, but it's quite different. It's not that long lasting kind of, and then you end up in an old people's home. No, nothing of that sort. So in that sense, it's called celestial, right? Yeah. So if you're samsaric being, well, I mean, as an ordinary person, if you don't know about the Dharma, wow, wouldn't it be nice to be a celestial being, right? Okay.
And Geshe, I was also wondering, you were saying, in the form realms, you have to attain those meditative states as a cause to be reborn in those. Does that mean you have to die in that state?
We'll get to this. I'll explain these states a little bit. No, you don't have to die in these states. You don't. Yeah. So I'll explain a little bit more about this because, as I said, we learn about this in so much detail. There are like 7 preparatory stages, and then you attain the actual meditative absorption, and then what happens when you die. I won't explain you all the 7 because that's not necessary. I'm just going to mention there are 7. But the thing is that you're actually, once you attain one of these meditative absorptions, the first one, for instance, then the afflictions of the desire realm, they no longer arise. They temporarily are gone. This is a question B asked me once in an email. So in answer to this, I already answered in the email, but just to stress it again. Now, what happens when you have that meditative absorption? You can only generate that in the desire realm. right? So in the desire realm, you can generate this meditative absorption that pertains, or that corresponds to the first level of the form realm. So you start off with that. And once you have attained that, only afflictions that pertain to that level of the form realm can arise, which are much subtler. And then when you die, as you had a preparatory phase or a preparatory time during which you generated the meditative absorption, as you developed it, you also accumulated the projected karma to be reborn there. And as you die then, in the desire realm, but with this meditative absorption, then the craving and the grasping of that particular realm, of the first level of the form realm, they activate that karma. So the 12 links work perfectly, but all on a different level, on a level of subtler kinds of afflictions. But we'll speak more about this. Again, yeah, as I said, I won't go into all the details on it, but give you some taste of it. Okay. Still got some time. What time is it? Yep, 5 more minutes. So let's look at the text again. All right. Now, each of the 4 meditative absorptions that characterize the distinct states of the form realm corresponds to an increasingly refined meditative stabilization. All right, so you have 4 meditative absorptions, and they all correspond to one of these levels. So the first level of the form realm is called the first dhyana. It's actually the realm itself, the place itself is called the first dhyana, as I said before. But to be reborn there, you need to have this first meditative absorption. Okay, and then this is true also for the other ones. Although these 4 absorptions can also be explained in the context of Dharma practice, you can generate them in the context of your Dharma practice. In fact, they are very important, especially this first one you definitely have to attain in order to then proceed on the path. This is usually not something we're aware of, but this is very much part of our study, that we study the form and formless realm the way we're going to study them here, not in the same detail, but at least to give you some rough understanding of them, like how to understand them in the pure samsaric context, but also how these serve as mental basis. They serve as, so for instance, you generate the meditative absorption of the first dhyana, which is a very strong concentrated mind, in order then to focus on emptiness. Right? We speak about calm abiding and special insight. Here, the kind of calm abiding where it can be a state that is even deeper than calm abiding. One of the meditative absorptions, for instance, you generate those in order then to meditate on emptiness very effectively. But what I'm doing right now here in this context, since we're still talking about just samsara, I explain them not in the Dharma context. So here they're presented as unrelated to such practices, that comes later, functioning instead as worldly path, as worldly consciousnesses that serve as causes for ordinary higher rebirth. Does that make sense? Okay. The 4 absorptions, so just in the samsaric context, the 4 absorptions of the form realm represent distinct stages of meditative stabilization. So one is deeper than the other. The first one is the coarsest of the 4, and these are all enhanced states of meditative absorption. It's hard for us to fathom, what does that even mean? How deep can you go into meditative absorption? I mean, again, besides just understanding samsara better, it gives us also a good sense of what the mind can do. Isn't it incredible that we can go from calm abiding, which is still a total ordinary state in comparison to these meditative absorptions. So calm abiding, being able to stay focused for at least 4 hours on one particular object, is just the first level before you even attained any of these 4. Incredible. We'll learn more about this. So calm abiding is the beginning, and from calm abiding you go through certain stages, and then only then you reach the first meditative absorption. Okay, but I'll say more about this, and it's already parts of it I've already explained, but we won't be able to cover this today. Anyway, I'll just read this last paragraph here. The 4 absorptions of the form realm represent distinct stages of meditative stabilization, achieved by temporarily eliminating certain coarser mental afflictions associated with the levels just below them. Because without temporarily overcoming these mental afflictions, the meditative stabilization won't remain. Because as we all know, the coarser afflictions, when they arise in our continuum, concentration is impossible. So they're temporarily gone. For instance, the first of the 4 absorptions of the form realm requires the elimination of anger and coarse forms of desire and attachment that pertain to the desire realm. So our ordinary anger, of course, no anger whatsoever can arise once you have the first meditative absorption. And certain forms, of course, desire and attachment, impossible. They disappear. They're no longer, as long as you have that meditative absorption, they do not arise. However, this elimination of afflictions is only temporary, as they reemerge when the meditative absorptions degenerate. That's the problem. They do degenerate. Unless you combine them with the practices, the Buddhist practices that are geared towards reaching liberation, reaching an irrevocable state or a lasting state, such as liberation, they will degenerate. That's the problem. It's just the power of our mind. It's also the power of the imprints of these afflictions, that unless these meditative absorptions are upheld, which is unrealistic at some point, they just naturally degenerate if they're practiced in a samsaric, just in the samsaric context. They will degenerate, and the afflictions of the desire realm will reemerge. Okay, great. So that should be enough for today. I covered a little bit more than usual, but hopefully it's clear enough. And you can, of course, read it again, and hopefully what I wrote at least is clear. But so you get a better sense of what it means to be reborn in these realms. And this is just the beginning. Of course, I go into more detail on especially these absorptions, how to attain these absorptions. I'll say a little bit more about that. Okay, great. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. I hope that next class we can go through all of them and then, of course, continue with the next verses. But as I said, unfortunately, I have to take a break next week. Yes, Shmuel? You raised your hand.
Venerable, just a short question if I can ask.
Please. Yeah, of course.
So you said that anger and detachment are counterproductive to concentration?
No, sorry. Anger is always counterproductive, but attachment and desire, they're coarser forms that are counterproductive. But the subtler forms, so maybe I should say this much. Once you have the first meditative absorption, when you have attained that, anger is impossible, resentment is impossible, but subtler forms of desire and attachment are possible. In fact, each of the levels up to the formless realm has subtle types of attachment and desire.
For example, coarse anger, when one is angry at something, isn't he like very concentrated on that object? So in that sense, maybe it's not.
I know. I see what you mean. When you're very
not
angry.
Positive concentration.
No, I understand what you mean. So, all right, that's a good point. So you're so single-mindedly just want to now destroy that person. Yes, but that's not the kind of concentration we're talking about, because here, although you're focused on possibly destroying your enemy, it's not that peaceful, it's not an inner peace. You see, like the meditative concentrations we're talking about here are very calm mind. This is a very agitated mind, very agitated, that has the strong desire now, right? The desire to destroy the enemy. Here with anger, of course, also gives rise to a desire, in this case of like this powerful. Is this me? Oh no. Sorry, that was my nephew. I don't know why he always calls me around this time. Anyway, here we're talking about like an anger that also gives rise to the desire, for instance, to destroy an enemy, to use that example. And desire also has that strong desire, also can lead to that kind of one-pointed activity. But it's not, again, this inner focus on just one object, right? It's on a whole task of, pursuing the enemy and possibly destroying them. But that peaceful, settled state of mind that is just one-pointed with great clarity and stability, focused on its object, that's not what you find in this case. Does that make sense? Ori, do you wanted to say something to that? Please. Go ahead.
Just a quick, you call it realm because the other being that you're surrounded with are also in those meditative absorption states?
I call it what? What did you say? I call
the form realm.
Form. No, I call it form realm because you have a body in that realm. There is an environment, there is an actual physical place. There's a physical place that you exist in, and you have a body, so that's why it's called form realm. And you're not always in the meditative absorption because you do.
Not meditative absorption, but there can be other being around me.
Oh yes, yes.
Form realm in a way.
Yes, your form realm buddies. Yeah. Exactly. No, there are beings. Definitely, you're not on your own there. Yeah. So there's not that much explanation given of these realms, but the little I remember is like, yeah, there's communication, there are relationships, very serene relationships, but for instance, there's no sexual intercourse, there's no sexual activity. There are friendships, there are possibly partnerships. All that is possible, but just not in the coarse, what we would call coarse, from a Buddhist point of view, in a coarse way that you find in the human realm, for instance. Yeah. Even in the celestial realm of the desire, like the desire celestial realm, you don't find the kind of, for instance, sexual activity. Not at all. There's like the satisfaction by just smiling, just satisfaction by just holding hands and so forth. So that is often found even in those realms. So the point is that celestial, that's maybe also another reason why we call it a celestial. But in the form realm, yes, you're not alone. There's actually a social life, which is quite different, no wild parties, whatever, more get-togethers for meditative practice in a community, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Are there any more questions? Maybe because we have a long break, we'll forgo the meditation this time. I hope it's okay if we don't do the meditation, so I can cover a little bit more. I mean, answer your questions, of course, and maybe cover a little bit more, so that will go through the text a little faster. Is that okay? Okay, so if there are no further questions, let me check. Okay, if there are no more questions, I'll continue a little bit. So, yeah, okay. So each of the 4 types of meditative absorption is preceded by 7 preparatory levels. So there's 7 levels that you go through. Okay. And these levels, they temporarily eliminate the mental afflictions of the level just below. But not only do these 7 preparatory stages provide only temporary relief from certain afflictions, the afflictions they eliminate are coarse types, commonly referred to as worldly afflictions. So classified as worldly path, the 7 preparatory levels that precede each of the therefore absorptions cannot eliminate subtler afflictions like the root ignorance or self-centeredness. So they're not really able to eliminate these. So it's certain type, of course, it's anger. Anger is always part of the desire realm. There is no anger that pertains to the form realm, for instance. But of course, there are subtler levels of desire, etc. So anyway, before you can generate first, let's say the first meditative absorption, there's 7 levels you go through, one after the other. Again, I said I don't need to go through them because it's really technical. It's just the different kind of meditations you need to go through. I don't think you need to know that. You can read about it. There are texts even in English. What are they called? Let me just look it up. There are a few books that are quite nice. So the meditative states in Tibetan Buddhism. There's one book called Meditative States in Tibetan Buddhism, The Concentrations and Formless Absorptions. That is one book. Who's it by? Let me check. By Lachi Rinpoche and Demolocho Rinpoche. So these 2 lamas, they taught. I don't know whether, well, they passed away a long time ago. Their reincarnations are now around. So it was in their previous life, both Lachi Rinpoche and Demolocho Rinpoche taught on the different meditative states. And they gave a lot of detail in these books. And there were explanations also by someone called Leah Zala and Jeffrey Hopkins. Jeffrey Hopkins, of course, you know. Leah Zala, she's less known. So that is one book. And then there's another book by Leah Zala. It's called The Study and Practice of Meditation. But again, it's really mainly, it's a whole book. These are 2 books just about these different concentrations. So I don't know how interesting you may find these books. Like I said, we learned about them. We studied about them in great detail. So then reading these books are very interesting, but it just takes a while to generate that kind of interest. Anyway, so to say it again, these 4 types, so you always have these 7 preparatory levels, and they temporarily eliminate in preparation for actually then attaining a particular meditative absorption. These in preparation to attaining such an absorption, these 7 preparatory level have to temporarily first eliminate the mental afflictions of the level just below. Because the mental afflictions that are just below, they prevent the mind from being from being so concentrated that you can actually attain what is called, well, let's say the first meditative absorption. So therefore, these preparatory stages, first of all, they get rid of these mental afflictions of the level just below. When I say of the level just below, they pertain to the level just below. So in other words, they're typical afflictions of the desire realm. Typical afflictions that sentient beings in the desire realm have, but that beings in the form realm don't have. As long as they're in the form realm, as long as they have these meditative absorptions, they can't have these mental afflictions. But of course, that's just a temporary relief. You don't totally overcome the afflictions of the desire realm. Plus, there's specific types, the coarser types, which are called worldly afflictions. Okay. Furthermore, and this is based on, some people would say all the afflictions of the desire realm are eliminated, and I follow the view of someone called Benjen Sonam Darpa. Benjen Sonam Darpa. He is the textbook author of the textbooks we used at the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, and it's also used in Ganden Chatse. It's used in Drepung Loseling, for instance. So every college of the great 3 monastery, the 3 Gelugpa monasteries, they use different textbooks, and the textbook we followed was by someone called Benjen Sonam Darpa. And so in his books, he talks about the afflictions that you have to eliminate are worldly afflictions. Okay. Anyway, so what's most important, I just mentioned this here, but what is most important to remember is the fact that afflictions of the lower realms, of the lower, of the stages below, they have to be eliminated. Otherwise, you cannot attain these absorptions. And so once the mental afflictions of the level below have been temporarily overcome, and one of the 4 absorptions has been achieved, the afflictions corresponding to the level of that dhyana begin to manifest. So in other words, let's say you've attained the first mental absorption, the first meditative absorption of the first level of the form realm. So now you have no longer do anger of the desire realm or desire of the desire realm, like the kind of typical desire or attachment of the desire realm. They don't manifest in your continuum. But are you free of afflictions? The bad news is no, you're not free of afflictions. Now a subtler form of afflictions manifest. So now afflictions that correspond to the level that you've reached now, they begin to manifest. So you're never totally free from them. Now, subtler levels of afflictions, for instance, attachment to your dhyana, to your meditative concentration, that generates. So you're attached to that. There's still attachment, but it's much subtler. All right. Okay. So having said that, and then I'll say a little bit more next time about the first level of the form realm. That then explains also the 7th level, and that's it. And we then I'll then explain also why there's no pleasant experience from the 4th level of the form realm onwards, because, well, pleasant experiences distract the mind basically. So the deeper your concentration, the more important it becomes that you don't have pleasant feelings, because if you have a pleasant feeling, it still distracts the mind. So in the very end, the higher you go up in samsara, the more important it is that your mind is neutral, right? So this is quite different to the experience of liberation and enlightenment, where you experience incredible bliss and still you can keep concentrated. But for samsaric experiences, the deeper you go when it comes to concentration, the less you want to have pleasant experiences. Okay, anyway. Yeah, I hope I don't lose all of you. I mean, the numbers are certainly going down over our class. I think today they're only 10. So I don't know. No, it's even less. I think it's only 9 left. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what
But
to do.
Geshe-ma, there is people in the YouTube. There
Yeah,
are
who
always
listen
like
later on.
5 or 6
Yeah.
people that are watching directly on YouTube, and then there is
Right.
people who works and see it later.
No, I understand. No,
So,
I mean, no, but I'm aware that I'm teaching something that I've never taught. So I don't know how interesting it really is, you know? I mean, I personally love it, but I know this is not a favorite topic of a lot of people. But anyway, I'll just continue. So no worries about that. But I'm a little bit concerned, and because I don't have the experience of you sitting in front of me, I can't read you to the same degree, which makes me, I'm a little bit hesitant. But
but
I'll
you can do like
continue.
what we speak about, that you can stop for a while and then see
Yeah,
all of us and then speak with us to
you're
see
right.
if
Yeah,
it's go deeper, or you
right.
understand.
And you're welcome, all of you, to also, of course, give me a feedback, even in class. Is it difficult? Is there a sense of, can you develop a kind of a feeling that this is possible, like a conviction at least that this is possible? Or yeah, anything would be helpful in this context, because it is so new for me to speak about it. And of course, if you want to go into more details, you have 2 books that I mentioned. Study and Practice of Meditation is one of them, and Meditative States is another one. I don't know whether they're still available. There may be, some of them may be sold out, but you probably still get PDFs of these books. All right. Anyway, but again, if you study Buddhist philosophy in detail, you must know all this. There's no way around it because it's all based on it. Okay, great. I know time is up, so let's take a moment. And again, please don't forget, we'll have no class next week, and then the time changes depending on well, your needs, etc., your time. I'm pretty flexible. It'll continue to be on Monday while I'm in Germany. I'm going to be in Germany for 3-4 months. It's going to continue to be on a Monday, but with the times, yeah, delete. You can let me know later. Great. So then let's dedicate. Take a moment to focus on the fact that we accumulated a lot of positive potential simply by reflecting on the ideas, the concepts in the Precious Garland. And so may whatever virtue we've accumulated, may that become a cause for all of us, of course, to reach the awakened state of a Buddha, not just for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. And in the meantime, may it cause our great masters like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all the other enlightened beings who are all around us, may they have a long life, a long and healthy life, and continue to inspire us, continue to guide us. And lastly, may, of course, whatever virtue we've accumulated help beings all around us, however subtle that help may be, but may it bring more peace to their mind, reduce their hatred, their grief, and so forth. And may it cause for the war to be over as soon as possible. And may the hostages, of course, be released and the suffering on both sides cease. So with that in mind, let's recite the prayers. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chinrezik, Denzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. All right. Thank you very much. And yeah, well, have a good 2 weeks. And see you then the Monday the 9th.
I will publish what we will decide. I will speak with you later. In which date do you fly to Germany?
On the 4th.
On the 4th.
Yeah. Oh, someone just posted. B just put this in the group. Thank you. B just posted.
Yeah,
oh, both
everything.
books.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, so you could just download the 2 books, so they are available. Okay, great.
Yes. Thank you, Geshe-ma, for
Thank you, everyone.
Safe travels,
Geshe-ma.
Thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye. Everyone, before I close the Zoom, if you want to take down the file, so do it now, because if I will close it, you cannot do it. So just let me know when you've finished. Bye.
Bye.
Yes, thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
שמואל, אתה רוצה להוריד? אתה במיוט.
סיימתי, תודה.
אוקיי, הילה, את צריכה עדיין להוריד או שאני יכולה לנתק?
אני בין כה לא מסתדרת עם זה, אז כן, תנתקי, לא משנה.
תשלחי לי אם את רוצה וואטסאפ ואני אעביר לך את זה בוואטסאפ.
מה, יש לך את הוואטסאפ שלי?
יש לי פשוט 2 טלפונים כרגע ואני מתבלבלת בין שניהם, אז פשוט תשלחי לי מין היי כזה, ואז אני אעביר לך.
אני אשלח לך עכשיו.